Welcome everybody to our online class on theodicy. Another one of those big fancy words that actually refers to something people think about rather a lot, and that is evil. It's unfortunate that people think about evil, people do, but thinking about evil, that's more what theodicy is really about. And it isn't just evil. It's when we're talking about theodicy, we're also talking about the divine and the divine's participation or lack of participation in evil. We're also talking about suffering. We're also talking about pain. So I'm going to kind of use evil as a catch-all for a whole host of icky things like this. So if you find that you're not really tracking with evil, I suggest substituting the word suffering or substituting the word pain. Even though those are not the same things, the problems that they bring about, theological problems, are very, very similar. So feel free to make those substitutions if that works better for you, and please continue to roll along with the arguments as we continue. Now, why should we study theodicy? Well, because when we are in ministry, we deal daily with people who are encountering evil, suffering, pain. Again and again, people ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people? And there's not really an easy answer to this one. So what we're going to be talking about today is the answers that people have given to this question. Now, if you're like me, you might find that while a lot of these answers are very interesting, none of them are completely satisfying. You know, if you feel this way, you are not alone. I would say actually most people who study this field feel this way. However, the answers that we're going to be giving, or that I'm going to be offering in the course of this class, are kind of the classic answers that world religions have come up with to address the question. They're kind of the best we got. So if you can come up with another explanation by the end of this course, I am all for it, and I encourage you to do so, because we've been trying to solve this puzzle for a couple thousand years and we have not got a handle on it. So please bring your creative theological skills to bear on this question, because it's important. It's important for us personally, it's important for the people we serve, and it's really important for us as ministers to ground ourselves in an understanding of this question that has enough heft to carry us through when we are encountering pain and suffering and sometimes direct evil in the course of our ministries. Now, where did this term, theodicy, where did it come from? Well, it was coined by Gottfried Leibniz in the 18th century. He was a German philosopher, and he got it by combining the Greek word for theo, the Greek word for God, and the Greek word for dice, which is the word for justice. And so what he was trying to say is, how is it that God is just if evil and suffering and pain exist in the world? And that's so the very name of the discipline, the theological discipline, theodicy, is a question. And as I said, it's not a question that really has been satisfactorily answered. And so we keep asking the question because people keep asking the question. Now, what's interesting is when you look up the word evil in the Oxford English Dictionary, it comes from a Teutonic word that means too much or over the limit. When you get beyond that, it just kind of takes the easy way out and says the opposite of good. Oh, great, thank you. Thank you, dictionary. That's helpful. But in fact, the definition of evil changes over time as people's needs and the dangers that people face on a daily basis change. This definition changes. So in early societies, evil was anything that threatened the survival of the tribe. That was the definition. And as other religions developed, evil became associated with disobedience, especially when those religions had a lot of rules. And so evil became equated with sin, anything that went against the will of the deity. So where does it come from, evil? What is its source? Philosophers and theologians usually talk about four sources of evil. First, through humans and their actions, things we do. Second, evil is the natural condition of the universe when catastrophic things happen, like earthquakes or tornadoes or hurricanes. A third source could be supernatural agents, like demons, for instance, or monsters. And the fourth source could be God or the gods. These are also capable of evil, depending on the tradition that you come from. Philosophers also talk about two kinds of evil. First of all, there's natural evil. So once again, this is evil that you find in nature, like hurricanes or tornadoes or earthquakes, or even plagues. But then the second kind is moral evil, and this is evil that comes about by conscious choice. So a person or a demon or a god chooses to do something that is evil. So natural evil and moral evil. Now, as our moral sense developed as a species, we started to hold our deities up to moral scrutiny. And we began to insist that our deities be morally pure. But what we didn't count for is this actually created a philosophical problem that we're still grappling with today, and sometimes not very successfully. So philosophers call this the impossible triangle. The impossible triangle was first posited by Epicurus way back in the pre-Socratic days in Greece. Epicurus was one of those pre-Socratic philosophers, and he's put it this way. He said, God is all-powerful, God is perfectly good, evil exists. But if God exists, there would be no evil. Therefore, God does not exist. So that was Epicurus's solution to the problem, Of course, not everybody is going to agree with Epicurus about this, but what he did do was outline for us pretty neatly and very succinctly the three elements of this problem that we're still dealing with. So we're going to map this to a triangle so that we can see how these three statements are in tension with each other. So here's the impossible triangle. First, divinity is all powerful. The second corner of the triangle is the divine is perfectly good. And the third corner of the triangle, evil or suffering, is real. Okay, so why is this a problem? Because you can't hold all three tenets to be true and be logically consistent. Perhaps morally consistent either, but certainly you can't logically hold all three statements to be true at the same time. But there's a caveat to that, and we're going to get to that in a minute. So, for instance, if the divine is all powerful, then why doesn't it stop evil? If the divine has the power to stop evil, why doesn't it? Why does the divine allow people to suffer? That is the big question. That is the big question that people who are suffering ask. And it's a question that they're going to be asking you directly. As I said, you don't have to have an answer for this, but it's awfully good to explore the possible answers. That's what we're going to be doing in this class. Now, there are people, of course, who do not hold all three to be true, in which case you don't have a problem. You don't have a logical problem. So let's parse that out. So for instance, those people who deny that the divine is all powerful, okay, if the divine isn't all powerful, then evil exists because the divine doesn't have the power to stop it. It's an easy answer. Why does evil exist? Because the divine is not all powerful and the divine does not have the power to stop evil. That's an answer. That's a good answer. That is a logically consistent answer. Let's look at another one. Let's look at a different. We take away another corner of the triangle. There are people who deny that the divine is perfectly good. So you don't have a problem if that's true. Okay, evil can exist, and the divine can be all powerful, and those two are not in conflict. If the divine isn't good, that means that the divine is the source of evil. The divine has a demonic side that perhaps relishes or desires evil. No logical problem there. You may have other logical problems, but with this triangle, there is not a logical problem there. It is a sufficient answer in itself. Okay, there's one more possibility here. There are people who deny that evil is real, or that suffering is real, or that even pain is real. And if that's true, the divine can be all powerful and the divine can be all good, and there's no logical conflict there because evil and suffering aren't real. They're illusory. So it's not really a problem. It just seems to be a problem. Okay, but what if you believe all three to be true? The divine is all powerful, the divine is all good, and evil and suffering are real. What if? Okay. How do you solve the logical dilemma there? there are 4 main strategies to this. The first strategy is justice. People who suffer deserve to suffer. This could be due to karma or to bad acts in a person's life. This is the answer that in the book of Job, Job's friends give to Job when he's sitting there suffering. Oh, you must have done something bad. Okay, it's a possible answer, right? But it's a hard one to sell for people who. It's a hard one to sell to victims. You know, if you are sitting with somebody in the hospital and they say, "Why is this happening to me?" You can't say, "Well, you must have done something bad." It's not a pastorally sensitive answer. However, it's an answer. Another answer is free will. Evil is necessary if people are going to have free will. If we're not just puppets, if we're not just robots, we have to be able to make our own decisions. And in order to do that, we have to have the freedom to choose evil. You know, hopefully most people are going to choose good, but some people aren't. And you have to live with that danger in order for the greater good of people being able to make the decision. And some people feel like that's a fair trade-off, you know. So according to this argument, and this is actually called an apology. An apology is just a formal explanation or a formal argument. So according to this apology, the free will apology, humans are responsible for evil, and even though the divine could intervene, the divine doesn't. So humans, and this is by design, because humans have to be free to choose evil or good, or the project of the human race fails. What are some objections to this, though? And there are. I think there are plenty, but the chief objection to this is it's supremely unfair. Innocents suffer, not just those who choose to do wrong, but people who made only good choices suffer. Is the good that comes about by letting people have that choice, does it outweigh the amount of suffering that comes because people have that choice? I think that's a fair question. And it's, again, a question that people have been arguing for a very long time. You know, is the payoff of freedom justified by the loss of profound suffering around the world? Another objection is that this doesn't really help us make sense of natural evil, like catastrophic weather events or anything at all. Okay, so another apology is the soul-making apology. This was first articulated by the 3rd century Christian theologian Irenaeus, and he says that the divine permits suffering because only if we can suffer can human beings grow morally and spiritually. In other words, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, and that's a good thing. If we lived in a perfect world, there would be no reason to stretch or to better ourselves or to grow morally or spiritually, right? And so the divine has to allow evil so that we can advance as spiritual beings. Now, of course, there are objections to this argument as well. Suffering, as often as not, drives people to do evil things. It doesn't make them good, it makes them worse. Kind of depending on the person, but that's often an outcome, right? And that's the whole cycle of violence thing that we see all the time. And so evil in this system is seen as an instrument leading to kind of an ultimate good of spiritual growth. But again, is the payoff justified by the loss? Is the good that we get from being able to grow spiritually and morally, does this justify the amount, the sheer volume of suffering in the world over time? A lot of people say no. I will leave you to answer that yourself. Now, the final apology is called the mystery defense, or the mystery apology. And this apology says that the divine sees the whole picture, but we don't. And eventually, the plan will unfold that in a way that will make sense to us why the divine has allowed pain and suffering and evil to exist. But we can't see that now because our view is so limited, or our brain is so small, our comprehension is so limited that we cannot possibly understand why the divine allows this. We are just incapable of it. We just have to trust and endure. That's an attractive defense, I think, for a lot of folks. But of course, there's objections to this one as well. For one thing, it's just not very intellectually satisfying. It feels like a bit of a cop-out. Oh, we can't understand. But maybe we can't. And maybe it's a cop-out. Again, you get to decide. Because nobody has solved this problem yet. It's a possible answer. And so you get to decide how much veracity this answer holds for you. So now that we've set up the basic problem and the four basic apologies for it, then now what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at the various religions of the world. Please feel free to download the chart that I've got there so we can fill it out together. I think this makes it gives you an awfully handy thing to refer to back as you want to quickly remind yourself of things that we covered in this class. But we're going to be looking at all the basic world religions and ask how do they solve the problem of the impossible triangle, and if needed, what apology do they use?